October 15th, 1943. The skies over Rabble Harbour, New Britain dawned clear and bright as Lieutenant Hiroshi Yamada stood in the doorway of the metallurgical laboratory, squinting against the morning sun. Imperial Japanese Navy intelligence had just delivered what they claimed was the most valuable prize of the Pacific campaign thus far, a single, twisted propeller blade salvaged from an American P-38 Lightning fighter that had crashed into the shallow waters off Bougainville. What the naval officers expected to be a routine analysis of inferior American manufacturing would instead become the moment that shattered everything the Imperial Japanese technical establishment believed about their industrial superiority. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the tale of how a single piece of twisted metal forced an entire empire to confront a devastating truth: that the technological gap between Japan and America was not narrowing as they had been told, but widening at a pace that would ultimately prove insurmountable. Lieutenant Yamada was not a soldier by training. At 36 years of age, with wire-rimmed spectacles and hands more accustomed to precision instruments than weapons, he seemed out of place in his crisp naval uniform. Before the war, he had been one of Japan's most promising metallurgical researchers at the Tokyo Imperial University, specializing in aluminum alloys. His expertise had earned him a direct commission and immediate assignment to the Naval Technical Research Institute when hostilities broke out. Captain Takeo Kato, commanding officer of the technical section, approached with the crate containing the propeller fragment. Unlike Yamada, Kato was a career military officer who viewed science primarily as a means to military superiority. "This is our opportunity, Lieutenant," Kato said, his voice carrying an uncommon note of excitement. "American manufacturing relies on quantity over quality. Their alloys are crude, their methods rushed. Analyze this and find their weaknesses." Yamada nodded respectfully, though inwardly he questioned this assessment. He had studied in the United States for 2 years before the war and had witnessed firsthand the rapid advance of American metallurgy. "I will begin immediately, Captain," he replied. The laboratory itself was a testament to Japanese technical ambition, the finest in the South Pacific, equipped with the most advanced analytical equipment available. The Imperial Navy had spared no expense in establishing this facility in 1942, recognizing that material science would be crucial to maintaining aerial superiority. The propeller fragment was larger than Yamada had anticipated, nearly 1 meter in length, its twisted form bearing testament to the violence of its final moments. The surface exhibited a peculiar silvery sheen, unlike the aluminum alloys he was familiar with. His assistant, Ensign Shigeru Tanaka, a young graduate of the Tokyo Institute of Technology, helped him transfer the piece to the examination table. "It is lighter than it appears," Tanaka observed, surprised by the weight as they set it down. "Much lighter than our own propeller alloys." Yamada ran his hand along the edge, noting the exceptional finish quality. "Take samples from 3 different points. We will begin with basic composition analysis." As the laboratory team began their work, a similar scene was unfolding across the Pacific Ocean. In Wichita, Kansas, at the sprawling Beech Aircraft Corporation facility, metallurgist Dr. Eleanor Winters was supervising the production of the very same propeller alloy that now fascinated her Japanese counterparts. At 42, Winters was one of the most accomplished metallurgical engineers in America, having transitioned from theoretical research to practical applications when the war demanded it. The B714 titanium aluminum composite is exceeding expectations in field performance, she explained to a group of military observers touring the facility. The strength-to-weight ratio is approximately 35% better than previous alloys, with superior resistance to metal fatigue at high revolution speeds. Colonel James Patterson, representing the Army Air Force's Material Command, nodded appreciatively. "And production scaling? Can we meet demand for the entire fighter fleet?" Winters gestured to the factory floor, where hundreds of workers, many of them women who had entered the workforce since the war began, operated massive machinery with precision and confidence. 3 months ago, we produced 50 sets weekly. Now we're at 300 and climbing. By January, we expect to hit 1,000 per week. This industrial might was precisely what Lieutenant Yamada and his team were about to discover, an advantage that transcended any single technological innovation. Back in Rabaul, the initial results of the composition analysis left Yamada confused. He rechecked the spectrometer readings, certain there must be an error. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "Run the tests again." 6 hours later, after multiple tests confirmed the initial findings, Yamada sat at his desk staring at the results in disbelief. The propeller contained significant amounts of titanium, a material the Japanese had experimented with but had never successfully incorporated into aircraft components at this scale. Ensign Tanaka stood nervously nearby. "Sir, I have confirmed the results with 3 different testing methods. The Americans are using a titanium-aluminum alloy that our own metallurgists have deemed theoretically possible but practically unfeasible for mass production." Yamada's mind raced. Before the war, Japanese metallurgical journals had published extensively on the theoretical advantages of titanium alloys for aircraft: lighter, stronger and more heat-resistant than traditional aluminum. But the extraordinary difficulties in refining titanium and the massive electrical requirements for processing had led most Japanese experts to conclude that such alloys remained a distant future possibility, not an immediate wartime reality. "Prepare a comprehensive report," Yamada instructed. "Include all test results and a comparative analysis with our standard Type 98 alloy." He paused, then added, "And Tanaka, this information is to be classified at the highest level." The following morning, Yamada presented his findings to Captain Kato and a hastily assembled group of naval intelligence officers in the base commander's conference room. The tropical heat made the small room stifling despite ceiling fans spinning overhead. "Gentlemen, our analysis reveals that this American propeller is composed of an advanced titanium-aluminum alloy that our own research programs have not yet mastered for production," Yamada began, his voice measured and clinical despite the bombshell he was delivering. "The material properties indicate a component that is 38% lighter than our comparable parts while maintaining superior structural integrity and fatigue resistance." One of the intelligence officers, Commander Shinji Ikeda, interrupted sharply. "Lieutenant, are you suggesting the Americans have surpassed our metallurgical capabilities? That seems highly improbable given our technical tradition." Yamada chose his next words carefully. "I am stating, Commander, that in this specific application, the Americans have implemented a technology that our own research indicated would require years of development and industrial capacity beyond our current capabilities." Captain Kato's face remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed. "What would be required for us to replicate this material?" Yamada took a deep breath. This was the most difficult part of his assessment. "Based on our understanding of titanium processing, we would need approximately 15 times our current electrical generation capacity dedicated solely to this process. The extraction methods alone would require industrial facilities larger than our entire current aircraft alloy production sector." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Japan's wartime economy was already stretched to breaking point, with electrical shortages affecting even critical military production. Commander Ikeda broke the silence, his tone defensive. "There must be another explanation. Perhaps this is a propaganda plant, a single experimental piece meant to be found." Yamada shook his head. "The wear patterns and oxidation indicate this propeller was in regular service. This is not an experimental piece. It is standard equipment on at least some portion of their fighter fleet. In fact, by this point in 1943, the United States had already equipped over 4,000 aircraft with components using the titanium-aluminum alloy, with production accelerating monthly. The industrial gap was not just significant, it was existential." While Yamada was delivering his report in Rabaul, Dr. Eleanor Winters was boarding a military transport plane in San Diego, bound for Washington, D.C. With her was a comprehensive report on the next generation of aviation alloys, materials that would make even the advanced B714 titanium composite seem primitive by comparison. Captain William Reynolds, a naval intelligence officer assigned as her escort, reviewed the security procedures for the third time. Remember, Dr. Winters, this report never leaves your physical possession until you hand it directly to General Arnold. The Japanese would give anything for this information. Winters smiled slightly. Captain, they would give anything just to know what we're already putting in our current aircraft. The gap is only going to widen from here. Back in Rabaul, Captain Cato ordered an expanded investigation. I want every piece of downed American aircraft collected and analyzed. Priority on engine components, airframe structures, and weapons systems. If they have made this leap in propellers, we must know what other advances they have achieved. Over the next 2 weeks, Lieutenant Yamada's team worked around the clock, analyzing everything from control surface hinges to machine gun barrels recovered from downed American planes. Each new sample confirmed what the propeller had first suggested. American metallurgy had surged ahead of Japanese capabilities across virtually every category. On November 1st, Yamada compiled his comprehensive report, a document that would eventually find its way to the highest levels of the Japanese War Ministry. In his private office, he added his personal assessment, words he carefully considered. It is my professional opinion that the disparity in metallurgical capabilities between our forces and the Americans represents not a temporary advantage, but a fundamental industrial gap that is widening monthly. The American ability to not only develop advanced alloys, but to immediately implement them in mass production represents a challenge to our war effort that technical ingenuity alone cannot overcome. As Yamada sat contemplating the implications of his report across the Pacific, the American war machine continued its relentless expansion. At the Alcoa Research Facility near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Dr. Robert Schwartz led a team of 70 metallurgists working on even more advanced alloys. The B714 was just the beginning, Schwartz explained to visiting officials from the War Production Board. The new generation composites reduce weight by another 20%, while improving heat tolerance by nearly 40%. We are literally rewriting the physical limitations of aircraft performance. Bernard Wilson, the production coordinator from the board, was less interested in the scientific breakthrough than its practical applications. When can we begin manufacturing, and how quickly can we scale? We begin pilot production next month, Schwartz replied. Full-scale production 3 months after that. By mid-1944, every fighter in the Pacific Theater will be incorporating these materials. This reality, the seamless transition from laboratory to mass production, represented the true American advantage, one that Japanese intelligence had consistently underestimated. In mid-November, Lieutenant Yamada was summoned to Tokyo to present his findings directly to the Naval General Staff. The journey took him first to Truk Lagoon by seaplane, then aboard the cruiser Takao to Yokosuka Naval Base. Throughout the voyage, he revised and refined his presentation, knowing that his message would be unwelcome among the senior leadership. In Tokyo, autumn had brought a chill to the air. The capital still maintained an atmosphere of normalcy, despite increasing shortages of consumer goods. Military police were increasingly visible on street corners, and propaganda posters promising inevitable victory covered construction barriers. At naval headquarters, Yamada was escorted to a conference room where 6 flag officers awaited his report. Admiral Suemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, sat at the center of the table, his expression inscrutable. Lieutenant Yamada, the Admiral began without preamble, your report has caused considerable discussion. Some find your conclusions regarding American technological superiority to be excessively pessimistic. What evidence convinced you of such a dramatic capability gap? Yamada placed his samples and photographs on the table. Admiral, when we examined the American propeller alloy, we discovered not just a superior material, but evidence of production methods that would require industrial capacity approximately 15 times greater than our current capabilities. This is not a matter of knowledge. Our own scientists understand the theoretical advantages of titanium alloys. It is a matter of industrial scale. For the next 2 hours, Yamada methodically presented his findings, demonstrating with calculations and metallurgical analyses the comprehensive nature of the American advantage. The officers asked pointed questions, often challenging his conclusions, but Yamada remained steadfast, his academic precision gradually silencing the objections. Admiral Toyoda finally raised his hand for silence. "If your assessment is correct, Lieutenant, what do you recommend as our response?" It was the question Yamada had anticipated and dreaded. The honest answer would be considered defeatist, perhaps even treasonous. Yet, as a scientist, he felt compelled to present the truth as he understood it. "Admiral, we cannot match the Americans in production volume or advanced materials in the short term. Our only viable strategy is to focus on specialized applications where our limited resources can achieve tactical significance, while simultaneously pursuing diplomatic options that might end the conflict before the industrial disparity becomes militarily decisive." The silence that followed was deafening. Suggesting a diplomatic solution rather than technical countermeasures was tantamount to admitting defeat, something unthinkable in Imperial Japanese military culture. Admiral Toyoda's face revealed nothing. "You will provide all technical details to the Naval Research Institute. They will determine what aspects of these American materials can be replicated with our existing industrial base." "That will be all, Lieutenant." Yamada was dismissed, but his report set in motion a fundamental reassessment within segments of the Japanese leadership. Within weeks, the Naval Technology Bureau established a special committee to address what they euphemistically termed resource-efficient alternatives to current alloy limitations. Meanwhile, American production continued its exponential growth. In December 1943, the United States produced more military aircraft than Japan had built in the entire previous year, with each successive generation incorporating more advanced materials. While Lieutenant Yamada's warnings began a slow percolation through the Japanese command structure, his immediate assignment took an unexpected turn. Rather than returning to Rabaul, he received orders to the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Research Division in Nagoya, where he would lead a crash program to develop aluminum alloys that could approximate some properties of the American materials while remaining within Japan's production capabilities. The Nagoya facility represented the pinnacle of Japanese industrial technology. Yet even here, the limitations were immediately apparent to Yamada. The electrical supply was inconsistent, with production frequently halted by power rationing. Raw materials arrived irregularly due to the increasingly effective American submarine campaign against Japanese shipping. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, the civilian research director at the facility, welcomed Yamada with unexpected candor. "I have read your report, Lieutenant. It confirms what some of us have suspected for months. The Americans are not just outproducing us, they are advancing technologically at a pace we cannot match under current circumstances." Yamada nodded, relieved to find a kindred spirit. "Then you understand the futility of our assignment." Nakamura smiled slightly. "Not futility, Lieutenant. Adaptation. We cannot match their titanium production, but perhaps we can develop alternative approaches that maximize our existing capabilities." For the next 3 months, Yamada and Nakamura led a team of 40 engineers and metallurgists in developing what would eventually be designated the Type 05 special aluminum alloy, a material that, while not matching the American titanium composites, offered a 15% improvement over existing Japanese alloys through innovative microstructure manipulation. As winter turned to spring, Yamada found himself increasingly torn between professional pride in their technical achievements and the growing certainty that such incremental improvements could not alter the fundamental strategic equation. Each day brought news of another American advance, another production milestone that dwarfed Japanese capabilities. In April 1944, Yamada received an unexpected visit from Commander Ikeda, the intelligence officer, who had initially dismissed his findings in Rabaul. The commander's formerly dismissive attitude had been replaced by grim acknowledgement. "Your assessment was correct, Lieutenant," Ikeda admitted as they walked through the cherry blossoms in a small garden behind the laboratory. "We have reliable intelligence that American monthly aircraft production now exceeds 5,000 units, with material quality continuing to improve. The industrial gap is—" He paused, searching for a term that wouldn't sound defeatist. "Significant." Yamada stopped walking. What does Naval Headquarters intend to do with this information? Ikeda looked uncomfortable. Officially, we are accelerating development of special attack tactics that maximize impact with minimal material requirements. Unofficially, certain elements within the government are exploring conditional diplomatic approaches through neutral intermediaries. The special attack tactics was a thinly veiled reference to what would soon become the kamikaze program, a strategy born of industrial desperation rather than martial spirit, despite how it would be portrayed in propaganda. By summer 1944, the Type 05 alloy had moved into production, but in quantities that highlighted the fundamental American advantage. While Mitsubishi struggled to produce enough of the improved alloy for 50 aircraft per month, Boeing's plant in Seattle alone was producing hundreds of aircraft with the advanced titanium components. In June, Dr. Eleanor Winters visited the newly captured airfield on Saipan, where American technical intelligence teams were examining captured Japanese aircraft. Her expertise had been requested to assess Japanese metallurgical capabilities firsthand. Major Thomas Clark, the intelligence officer supervising the technical analysis, guided Winters through the collection of salvaged enemy aircraft parts. We have components from 6 different Japanese fighter and bomber types here. Our preliminary analysis indicates they're still using the same basic aluminum alloys they started the war with some minor compositional adjustments. Winters examined a Japanese propeller assembly, running her fingers along the surface. There are signs of material evolution here, but they're working within severe constraints. Their new alloy shows clever heat treatment modifications, but the base material is fundamentally unchanged. She looked up at Clark. They're trying to solve with ingenuity what they cannot address through industrial capacity. Clark nodded. Our latest intelligence suggests they've completely understood the significance of our titanium alloys. They recovered one of our propellers from a downed P-38 last year and conducted an extensive analysis. And their response? Winters asked. They established a special research unit, but they simply don't have the electrical capacity or raw materials to replicate our approach. They're developing workarounds, but the performance gap continues to widen. The irony was not lost on Winters. The very propeller that Lieutenant Yamada had analyzed months earlier had been manufactured under her supervision in Wichita. In Nagoya, Lieutenant Yamada received increasingly desperate requests from operational commands for technical solutions to counter American material advantages. Each request further confirmed what he had first realized in Rabaul. The war had evolved into a contest of industrial systems, not just military forces. In September 1944, as American forces approached the Philippines, Yamada was summoned to Tokyo once again, this time to brief the Supreme War Council on material constraints affecting aircraft production. The meeting took place in an underground facility, a precaution against the American bombing campaign that had begun to target Japanese cities. The council members listened with grim faces as Yamada detailed the unbridgeable technological gap. When he finished, Field Marshal Hajime Sugiyama, Chief of the Army General Staff, asked the question that had been implicit throughout the presentation. Lieutenant, speaking strictly as a technical expert, not as a military officer, what timeline do you project for America's complete material superiority to become militarily decisive? Yamada hesitated, understanding the magnitude of what he was being asked. Field Marshal, based on current production trends and the rate of technological implementation, I would estimate that by mid-1945, American material superiority will reach a point where no tactical or operational countermeasures can meaningfully affect the strategic outcome. His words hung in the air, the clinical assessment of a scientist delivering what amounted to a death sentence for Japan's war ambitions. After the meeting, Yamada was approached by a civilian official he recognized as Tatsuo Kobayashi, a senior economic advisor to the cabinet. You spoke with remarkable candor, Lieutenant, Kobayashi said quietly as they walked down a corridor. I spoke as a scientist, sir. The material evidence permits no other conclusion. Kobayashi nodded. There are those of us who have understood this reality for some time. Your propeller analysis from last year was more significant than you might realize. It provided concrete evidence for what our economic planners had feared, that America's industrial system represents not just a larger version of our own, but a fundamentally different approach to production and innovation. The conversation confirmed what Yamada had suspected. His technical analysis had become part of a larger strategic reassessment among certain Japanese leaders, even as official policy continued to demand unwavering commitment to victory. In the final months of 1944, as American forces established air superiority over most of the Western Pacific, Yamada continued his work at Nagoya, developing increasingly ingenious but ultimately inadequate technical solutions. The factory had begun operating at night to avoid American bombing raids, with production frequently interrupted by air raid warnings. Dr. Nakamura, whose health had deteriorated under the strain of round-the-clock work and inadequate nutrition, still maintained his scientific curiosity. "The Americans have sent us an unintended but valuable lesson in industrial organization," he remarked one evening as they worked by lamplight during a power restriction. "Their achievement isn't just in the titanium alloy itself, but in the seamless integration of research, development, and mass production." Yamada agreed. "After the war, assuming we both survive, this experience will guide how we rebuild our technological industries." It was the first time either man had openly acknowledged the inevitability of defeat, a realization that had begun with a single twisted propeller blade. In January 1945, with American bombers now regularly appearing over Japan's home islands, Lieutenant Yamada received orders that reflected the desperate state of Japan's war situation. The Nagoya research team was to be dispersed to multiple smaller facilities in rural areas, continuing their work in disused school buildings and converted warehouses to avoid destruction in air raids. Before the team disbanded, Dr. Nakamura gathered them for a final assessment. "Our work has advanced metallurgical science under the most challenging conditions imaginable. When peace eventually returns, this knowledge will help rebuild our nation. Remember that our scientific understanding, unlike factories and equipment, cannot be destroyed by bombing." This perspective, looking beyond defeat to eventual reconstruction, had become increasingly common among Japan's technical elite, though rarely expressed openly. As spring arrived in 1945, bringing with it the devastating American firebombing campaign against Japanese cities, Yamada found himself at a small research outpost in the mountains of Gifu Prefecture. With minimal equipment and dwindling supplies, his team continued refining heat treatment techniques for aluminum alloys, work that had little immediate military application, but maintained the appearance of contributing to the war effort. In May, Yamada received an unexpected visitor. Commander Ikeda arrived wearing civilian clothes, having traveled secretly from Tokyo. "Lieutenant, I've come unofficially," he explained after ensuring they could speak privately. "There is a group within the ministry working to compile and preserve technical knowledge that will be essential for post-war reconstruction. Your metallurgical expertise, particularly your understanding of American production methods, is considered invaluable for this effort." This revelation that elements within the government were actively planning for defeat, while officially demanding fight-to-the-death resistance, highlighted the fracturing of Japan's leadership as the war situation deteriorated. Yamada agreed to prepare comprehensive documentation of his research, including comparative analyses of American and Japanese metallurgical approaches. "This isn't just about propeller alloys anymore," he told Ikeda. "It's about understanding an entire system of industrial organization that we must eventually adopt if Japan is to rebuild." While Yamada worked on his report across the Pacific, Dr. Eleanor Winters was similarly looking toward the post-war world. In a meeting at the War Department in Washington, she presented recommendations for handling captured Japanese technical experts after the conflict ended. Their metallurgists and engineers should be viewed as valuable resources, not just as representatives of a defeated enemy, she argued to the committee planning occupation policies. "They understand the challenges of resource limitations in ways that could benefit our own efficiency improvements." Colonel James Patterson, now a brigadier general, nodded in agreement. "The same titanium alloys that helped win this war will form the foundation of commercial aviation development. Having their perspective could accelerate our progress." This viewpoint, seeing former enemies as potential collaborators in technological advancement, represented an American pragmatism that would ultimately shape the post-war reconstruction of Japan. In August 1945, as atomic weapons and Soviet entry into the war finally forced Japan's surrender, Lieutenant Yamada was among the technical experts quickly identified by occupation authorities for professional consultation rather than detention. His analysis of the American propeller alloy, ironically, had made him valuable to the very nation whose industrial superiority he had documented. By October, Yamada found himself in an unusual position, working alongside American metallurgists, including Dr. Eleanor Winters, who had arrived in Japan as part of a technical assessment team. The former adversaries now collaborated in evaluating Japanese research facilities and identifying innovations that had emerged from wartime necessity. During one inspection of the damaged Mitsubishi plant in Nagoya, Winters and Yamada discovered they had been examining opposite sides of the same technological puzzle for years. "Your heat treatment process for aluminum-magnesium alloys is remarkably innovative," Winters commented as they reviewed laboratory notebooks recovered from the facility. "Achieving these structural properties without titanium represents genuine scientific ingenuity." Yamada nodded. "Necessity forced certain approaches we might never have considered otherwise. But your production system was the true innovation, the ability to move from laboratory to mass manufacturing without compromising material quality." Winters smiled. "That's the lesson we learned from automobile manufacturing. Science without production scale remains merely theoretical." This exchange captured the essence of what would become Japan's post-war industrial philosophy, combining scientific precision with mass production techniques, an approach that would eventually make Made in Japan a global mark of quality rather than the wartime reputation for inferior copies. In the spring of 1946, as Japan began the long process of rebuilding under occupation, Hiroshi Yamada, now returned to civilian status as Dr. Yamada, accepted a position at the newly reorganized Tokyo University, where he would lead the development of a metallurgical engineering program specifically focused on lightweight alloys for transportation applications. During the dedication of the new laboratory facilities, he displayed a small piece of metal in a glass case, a fragment of the American propeller that had revealed so much about industrial capability. Beneath it, a simple inscription read, "The Beginning of Understanding." Dr. Eleanor Winters, who had returned to America to lead aluminum research for commercial aviation applications, maintained correspondence with Yamada. Their professional relationship, born from the analysis of a single propeller blade, represented the transfer of knowledge that would help transform Japan's post-war economy. In a letter to Yamada in late 1946, Winters captured the historical significance of their parallel wartime efforts. Perhaps the most important alloy was not titanium aluminum, but the eventual combination of our different approaches to science and industry. From this fusion, both our nations will create materials and methods neither could have developed alone. 20 years later, in 1966, when Japanese manufacturing had begun its remarkable global emergence, Dr. Yamada, by then an internationally respected metallurgist, gave an interview to an American technical journal. When asked about the turning point in Japan's industrial development, his answer surprised many readers. "It began with a propeller blade from a P-38 Lightning recovered from the waters near Bougainville in 1943. What we learned was not just about a superior alloy, but about an entire approach to integrating science, engineering, and production that would eventually transform our nation from wartime defeat to economic success." The technical insights gained from that single component had indeed changed everything, not through the material itself, but through the industrial philosophy it revealed. The twisted metal that had once signaled inevitable defeat had ultimately helped forge the path to Japan's post-war renaissance. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.